That's a really good question.
I thought about wearing it. Wow. Bling.
Wrestling's pretty good. Thank you. Anyone else?
You roll with the punches.
No, thank you.
I love to hit.
Frank Castle is in my bones. Frank Castle is in my bones.
Like, you know what? I can't look at this.
And the things that I saw in him and that he saw in me, too.
It was announced that Lady Gaga was in talks to play Harley Quinn, and I absolutely had to get your take on this. Did you hope that works out? And if it does, do you see that taken away from what Margot Robbie is doing with the character?
Not at all. These comic book characters, man, they're like mythology characters. Nobody's ever like, there can only be one movie about Zeus or one movie about a cowboy. These are larger than life figures that even if they have particular identities like Harley Quinn, you can have multiple performers playing them, as we've seen for eons with James Bond, with Batman, with Superman. The performer can be replaced, exchanged over and over again. It's the character that's the star. So when Todd Phillips is like, hey, I'm going to do a sequel to like one of the most successful comic book movies of all time, the R-rated Joker movie that won Academy Awards, this time, Joker will, of course, have Harley Quinn, and Harley Quinn is going to be played by one of the most famous artists on the planet. That, to me, is just brilliant, no-brainer marketing, man. Like, that's smart. And, if somebody's like, well, I prefer Margot's version, great. You'll have both. Nobody's going to force you to watch either or. But, these characters, Batman exists in the movies, Batman exists on TV, Batman exists in the cartoons, Batman exists in comics and video games. And it's not always the same person playing the character. These characters are so beloved that like people will like seeing multiple people tackle the character, particularly people they never expected to. Lady Gaga's Harley Quinn is a poster waiting to happen and a dream that nobody ever had before. But now everybody would like to see that. It's like, wow, that makes sense. Doesn't mean that everyone's like, we're done with Margot. Not at all. More Margot, and let's see Lady Gaga Harley Quinn it up as well.
It seems like DC studios are starting to right the ship a little bit. They cleaned house and they're talking about doing certain things for fans of the characters. But do you think there's something to Marvel where they didn't have really multiple people playing multiple characters at one time? Was there more of a bind and they're able to kind of weave that whole universe together because there's not a lot of different iterations?
Yeah, but to be fair, the DC and Warner Brothers was doing that as well. It's only recently that they're going to switch Batmans and stuff. And, just like over at Marvel, they're like, well, now we got a new Captain America. I think it looks like you get about a decade before, they're like, okay, we got to switch. And maybe some of that's because performers are like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't understand why. It's like practically printing free money. Maybe it's because you got a studio that's like, we don't want to pay these cats anymore because they eventually priced themselves up to a certain point. And it behooves the studio who's funding all this to like keep the budget lower. So they go for salaries of actors, that aren't as in demand. And suddenly you get a whole new universe and stuff. I think both, we talk about them as if they're the only two entities, but like Marvel and DC have had to figure out what to do with pop culture popularity over the course of the last decade plus. You got to remember, comic book movies prior to that were few and far between, and they could be very successful, but it wasn't this ongoing franchise. It wasn't this whole genre that fed the public every other month with new material. You get a Batman movie and then you have to wait for something for a long time. Nowadays, you're getting comic book superheroes nearly every month in the movies. You get them on Disney Plus, you get them on HBO Max. People still aren't tired. We still haven't felt inundated by any stretch of the imagination. So, I feel like we now live in this place where it's been so normalized. It used to be like, how do you sell this comic book movie? You can't even put the X-Men in their real outfits. You got to dress them in Matrix black leather because nobody will understand these concepts. And now people understand the concepts after 10 years of Marvel, you know, first and DC afterwards, trying to figure out what they want to do. From the surface, Marvel has obviously been more successful at it, figured it out early on. They had one person at the helm, Kevin Feige, who's steered that ship so expertly through uncharted waters, which are now very charted, and other boats are following through. So they figured out a lot in a decade, I would say. And, you know, what they both figured out, both Marvel films and DC films, have kind of served their separate companies best and given other people who hope to dive into universe building, you know, a path to follow. But we all talk about this shit as if it's been baked into the business since, you know, before I was born, but we're only dealing with like superhero mania for the last decade, and it doesn't seem to be going anyplace else. They seem to be self-correcting and learning in real time what they want to do, how to extend the universes, you know, and they feed excitement like fucking crazy by like doing things like 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, they were like, oh, we're going to go meet to talk about Marvel phase fucking 4 or 5. You know, and the whole world was like, yes, we all understand what that means. It doesn't have to be explained, these concepts, to people anymore. So I think they're doing an expert job. I don't think the audience is going anywhere anytime soon. You know, even when you see a movie that doesn't work periodically, like I guess Morbius didn't light the world on fire, you know, there are other comic book movies that will always take a shot at the title, but there's two big ones in the world, we all know. And we keep our eye on them to see how they're doing, and both of them right now seem to be doing good. Really, I mean, fucking great, to be honest with you. I know a lot of people talk about like DC's right of the ship, but like, you know, like the Snyderverse stuff was great too. They just didn't know what to do with it, how to market it. Like, or, you know, they got to a place where like, that's it, we're going to stop and move on. And it felt like they did that at a time just when it was sinking into the culture, and people were like, no, this is our version of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, you know, for me, I'll always be baffled why they don't just give Zack Snyder a bunch of money over at HBO Max and be like, do a thing once a year.
Right.
You know,
Totally.
They got a platform for it. He's, you know, an incomparable filmmaker, whether you like him or not. He knows what he's fucking doing with a camera. The guy paints splash pages. Let him play in that fucking universe. It always baffles me that they're like, no, we're done with that. Now we're just going to do this for a minute. You know, I'm not a person that will ever shit on a comic book movie because I grew up wishing that they existed more than they did. I'm not a person that will ever be tired or, you know, I'm over the comic book movie. I love a simple morality tale about everyone running away from the worst thing that ever happened, and then one person dressed up very colorfully running toward it.